Hello students, today we are going to discuss how changes in income affect the budget line of the consumer. We have already seen what a budget line is. A budget line shows the different quantities of two commodities that a consumer can buy by spending all his available income. A budget line has an x-intercept and a y-intercept. The x-intercept shows the maximum quantity of a commodity that can be bought by a consumer, and y-intercept shows the maximum quantity of commodity which is measured along the areas that the consumer can buy. So when his income changes, what will happen to his consumption pattern? Let us analyze this first with the help of a schedule. Suppose there are two commodities, commodity X and Y. Total income of the consumer is 60. Price of X is 2 rupees and price of Y is 4 rupees. So here we have the conditions. Y is equal to 60, price of X is 2, price of Y is 4. So now we have different combinations here, then quantity of X, quantity of Y. Quantity of X and quantity of Y. We have combination A here. Suppose in combination A, the consumer is spending all his income. That is one of our assumptions in analyzing price line or budget line. So he spends all his income, rupees 60, on commodity X. Then he can buy 30 units of X and 0 units of Y. Okay. Then he can reduce the consumption of X. Suppose he reduces consumption of X to 24. Then the total income that will be spent on consumption of X will be 24 into 2 is equal to 48. And the balance 12 rupees is spent on consuming Y. When he spends 12 rupees on consuming Y, he can consume 2 units of Y. So 3 units of Y. 3 units of Y because price of Y is 4 rupees. Then suppose consumer reduces consumption of X by another 6 units, that is he consumes 18 units of X. Then he will be spending 36 rupees on commodity X, and of the total income of 60, 24 rupees will be the balance available. By spending 24 rupees on Y, he can consume 6 units of Y. Again, combination B, he reduces consumption of X by another 60 units. At this point, he is spending 24 rupees of his income on commodity X. The balance 36 rupees, when it is spent on commodity Y, he will get 9 units. That is 36 by 4 is 9 units. And again, suppose he reduces consumption of X by another 6 units, then the total investment on X is 12. The balance left with the consumer is 48 rupees. By spending 48 rupees on Y, he can consume 12 units of Y. 48 by 4 is equal to 12. And again, he consumes 0 units of X, reduces consumption of X by another 6 units, and now total consumption of X is 0. So it means that the entire income, that is 60 rupees, is spent in consuming commodity Y. So 60 by 4 is 15 units of Y. So this is the possibility in which the consumer can spend his given income on two commodities. He can spend all his income on X, then he will consume 30 units of X, or he can spend all his income on Y, then we consuming 50 units of Y. These 2 points are the intercepts. When we are presenting this in a diagram or illustrating this, we will have an x-intercept and a y-intercept. X-intercept will show the point from which the budget line starts on the x-axis, and the y-intercept shows the point on the y-axis from where the budget line starts on the y-axis. So the x-intercept will be 30 here. Supposing that commodity X is measured on the x-axis, the x-intercept will be 30 and y-intercept will be 50. So we have 1 point here. Then we are consecutively plotting the combinations on the budget space, and we get a line which is called the budget line, which shows the quantities of two commodities X and Y that the consumer can consume by spending all his income. Here you can see he is spending all his income. Again he is spending all his income. All these combinations he is spending all his income. You can plot the expenditure also here to understand it better. Suppose 30, 60 plus 0. 16 is 15 into 2. Again write it down. You can again write it down. How we got to 60? 30 into 2 plus 0. Then again 24 into 2 plus 3 into 4. 18 into 2 plus 6 into 4. 12 into 2 plus 9 into 4. 6 into 2 plus 12 into 4. 0 plus 15 into 4. So this is how he is spending all his income. He is consuming 30 units of X at price 2, 24 units of X at price 2, and 3 units of Y at price 4, so on and so on. 0 units of X at price 2 and 15 units of Y at price 4. So this is the schedule that represents his budget line, or the budget line or the constraint of the consumer. The budget line in fact shows the constraint of the consumer beyond which he cannot go, because he is limited by his income in going beyond the budget line. Now let us see what happens if the consumer's income changes. Instead of 60, he has an income of 120. He has an income of 120. What will happen when his income changes? Okay. Y instead of 60 is 120 now. Income of the consumer has doubled, and now what will be the consumption of X and Y? We represent the new consumption of X by X dash and new consumption of Y by Y dash. So if his income is 120 and we are assuming that prices of X and Y has not changed, the total number of X that the consumer can buy is 120 by 2, which is 16. And how many units of Y? 0 units of Y. Again, I can consume 48 and 6, 36, 12, 24, 18, 12, 24, 0, 30. So you can notice the change here. When his income doubles, he can double the consumption of both commodities as long as prices of the commodities does not change. So what will happen to the X and Y intercept? X intercept was earlier 30, it now changes to 60. Y intercept was earlier at 15, now it changes to 30. So the intercept point is also doubled, the value of the intercept point has also doubled. That means both intercepts changes. That is a shift in the budget line. It means a shift in the budget line. Okay, so this is the tabular representation of a budget line. What happens to the consumer's budget line when his income changes? For simplicity, we have assumed that income doubles from 60 to 120. We can do any combinations of income and any combination of these commodities for the sake of convenience, and in order to get indivisible units of commodities, we have taken income to be 60, prices of X and Y to be 2 and 4 respectively, and then we assume income to double from 60 to 120. It will be the same. The degree of change or the proportion of change will be the same even if you change the level of income or the prices of the commodities. Okay. So now let's analyze this with a picture. Okay. Here we are X intercept. In case A is and case B is 60. Case A, 60 case A. This is the case A, and this is the case B. So in case A, the x-intercept is 30, and in case B, the x-intercept is 60. Y-intercept. What are the y-intercepts? In case A, the y-intercept is 15, and the x-intercept is, so y-intercept is 15, and in case B, the y-intercept is 30. So these are the 2 points that we have to note, the 2 intercepts. What happens when this number changes? Now, we are spreading. This is the diagram. This is the diagram. Here you have quantities of commodity Y, and here we have quantities of commodity X. Okay, and we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. So on the y-axis, similarly we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. The scale is not exact and it is different for the 2 axes, but what is important is the shape of the budget line. So in the case A, the x-intercept was 30 and the y-intercept was 15. So we have 2 points here. We are connecting these 2 points and we get a budget line which we name as BL. So BL is the initial budget line, the A case situation, where if you are spending all his income on commodity X, the consumer was able to purchase 30 units of X. So we have plotted it here. Then when he reduces X by 1 unit, he can increase consumption of Y by some units. Again, when he goes on reducing the consumption of X to the left of 30, he can increase the consumption of Y. Position on the Y will move above 0. So that is why we have budget line of this shape. When he reduces consumption of X, some income will be left with him, and this leftover income can be spent on consuming Y. So from 0 consumption of Y, the consumer starts increasing consumption of Y. And finally, when he is consuming no X's, then the entire income will be spent on consuming Y, and at such point, he will be consuming 50 units of Y as we discussed in the schedule. So 15 will be the Y-intercept and 30 will be the X-intercept. 15 will be the Y-intercept and 30 will be the X-intercept. Now, when his income increases, what happens? We have seen from the schedule that when his income doubles from 60 to 120, the number of X that he could purchase by spending all his income doubles as long as the price of X remains same. So instead of 30, now the consumer can buy 60 units of X. Now the consumer can buy 60 units of X. So the X-intercept changes to 60. Then what about Y-intercept? It also changes. Earlier, the consumer could buy 15 units of Y only with 60 rupees income. Now that his income has doubled from 60 to 120, he could buy 30 units of Y. So Y-intercept also changes to 30. And again, we are plotting these two, and we get another line. Again, this is the budget line, shifted budget line. We can name it something like B dash, B dash, L dash, B dash, L dash. And what happened? An increase in income led to an outward shift in the budget line. That is, his restriction has been relaxed Now he can consume more of both commodities if he wants. And his x-intercept doubles and his y-intercept also doubles because income doubled. Similarly, if instead of his income rising, if it had fallen, then the budget line would have shifted downwards to the left. So this is how a budget line shifts in response to changes in consumers' income. An increase in consumers' income leads to an outward or rightward shift to the budget line, and a fall in the consumers' income leads to a downward or leftward shift of the budget line. And these shifts will be parallel as long as the prices are in a certain proportion. Okay, so this is how budget line shifts. So now this is the skeleton of a shift in the budget line. Now we can explain the income consumption curve using this budget line. Income consumption curve using the budget line. It's a sort of curve called the income consumption curve, which shows consumers' equilibrium as successive points of equilibrium as income increases. What happens? We already studied the equilibrium of the consumer. The equilibrium was defined by the tangency of highest possible indifference curve with the budget line. So, if this was the budget line applicable to the consumer, then there will be an indifference curve which is tangent to the budget line, and that will be consumer's equilibrium. We will also have another budget line, another indifference curve tangent to this higher budget line B dash L dash. So that will be another point of equilibrium. And when we are plotting these successive points of the equilibrium of the consumer on higher and higher budget lines, we get a curve which is called an income consumption curve. So an income consumption curve is a curve which shows the successive equilibrium points of the consumer as his or her income increases. Okay, so now we have power of y on the y-axis and x on the x-axis. We will have a number of budget lines. We will have a number of budget lines, and each budget line will show a particular level of income. This budget line shows this level of income. When his income increases, the budget line shifts again. It shifts again, shifts again, shifts again, shifts again, and goes on shifting as long as the consumer's income is increasing. And we can name these budget lines BL, B1, L1, B2, L2, B3, L3, B4, L4, B5, L5. Now there will be different indifference curve also, because indifference curve is thick, dense, and there will be indifference curve at any particular point. So we are having different equilibrium of the consumer, and when we are plotting on this equilibrium together, we get a curve, and this is called the income consumption curve. We abbreviate into ICC. So this is the income consumption curve, and it shows different successive equilibrium of the consumer as his or her income increases. Okay, you can see that this is one particular point of equilibrium of the consumer, the lowest level of income. He has particular indifference curve. This is the point of equilibrium. When his income increases, budget line shifts to the right. There is another indifference curve, and we have another equilibrium point. Again, consumer's income increases, budget line shifts outwards. It is tangent to another indifference curve. This is the third equilibrium point of the consumer. Budget line again shifts in response to increasing income. There is another indifference curve. Again, the fourth point of equilibrium. Budget line shifts again and again and again, and we have 6 budget lines because there are significant increases in income. And then we are plotting all these points together. We are connecting these equilibrium points of the consumer with a curve, and this curve is called the income consumption curve. Income consumption curve, which shows the successive equilibrium points of the consumer as his income increases. Now, why is the income consumption curve important, or why do we talk about this income consumption curve? The income consumption curve is important because we can study the nature of the commodity from this income consumption curve. By nature of the commodity, we mean whether the commodity is a normal one or an inferior one. A normal commodity is one whose demand increases as consumers' income increases. An inferior commodity is one whose demand falls as consumers' income increases. This will need more explanation. You can see that there are different types of commodities. Some commodities are found to be normal commodities, which the consumer will want to consume more if his income increases. On the other hand, there are some other commodities which the consumer think to be inferior for some reason. He thinks that these commodities are inferior. Then why is he consuming it? He is consuming it simply because he cannot afford a better commodity, or what he thinks a better commodity. Okay, so the inferior commodity, the consumer is consuming the inferior commodity because he is compelled to do, because his income is low. When his income increases, he will not want to consume it anymore. He will substitute this commodity with another one. So what happens when his income increases, his consumption falls. You can see some real examples also. There are different commodities. For example, consider basmati rice, for example. When a consumer's income increases, basmati rice is superior quality rice which has a higher price. Normally, rice in our state, Kerala, is around 40 to 50 rupees, normal rice in open market. But basmati rice costs anywhere from 70 to 200 and above. Okay, so it is considered to be superior quality rice, and it is also more tasty or tastier. So when income increases, consumers normally go for higher qualities of this rice, higher qualities of this rice. So this is an example for a normal commodity. Demand increases as consumers' income increases. But at the same time, there is some rice which is supplied through the public distribution system. When consumers' income increases, they do not usually go to purchase this PDS rice because they consider it to be inferior for some reason. Okay, so that commodity is considered to be an inferior commodity, the rice distributed through public distribution system, because the consumer thinks that this is inferior, the commodity is inferior. Okay, and there are other examples also in the case of fish, in the case of pots, in the case of crockeries, in the case of all these things. Okay, vegetables, all these things are subject to these types of different behavior. For example, in earlier times we used to have pots made of mud, and now when people's income has increased, they are substituting it with more steel crockeries, and these pots are disappearing like anything because they consider it to be inferior. So here the steel crockeries are normal commodities whose demand increases when income increases, and these pots made of clay are inferior commodity because its demand falls when income increases. So this is an example for normal and inferior commodity. So how can we represent a normal and inferior commodity through an income consumption curve? Okay, income consumption curve can have different shapes. Income consumption curve can have different shapes. Let us draw a different income consumption curve. These are the budget lines. These are the budget lines. These are shifted upwards because consumers' income has increased. Each time his income increases, his budget line shifts upwards. So these are his budget lines, and now these are the indifference curve. This is the indifference curve 1, IC2, IC3 and IC4. This is B1L1, BL, this is B1, L1, B2, L2 and B3, L3 for measure lines. Now we are finding the income consumption curve, and you can see that this income consumption curve is different from the income consumption curve that we draw previously. What is the difference? The first one was going positively sloping towards the right. Positively sloping towards the right. So shows that the values in both axes were increasing. But here the income consumption curve is sloping upwards, but it is negatively inclined, or it is backwardly sloping, backward bending. Why it is backward bending? Because the x-axis, the values on the x-axis are shrinking. When consumer's income increases, his budget line shifted from BL to B1 L1. Initially, the number of eggs consumed was 10, for example. When his income increased, his consumption increased to 12. Again, his income increased, his consumption increased to 13. Again, his income increased, but this time his consumption fell to 11. So, what does it mean? Means that when consumer's income increased to a higher level, he began reducing the consumption of eggs. He began reducing the consumption of eggs. Sorry for the disturbance. So it means that when his income increases, his consumption of commodity eggs began to fall. Initially, it was increasing from 10 to 12 to 13, but at a higher level, when income increased further, consumption fell from 13 to 11. Why this happened? Usually, we consume more when our income increases, but here the consumer has reduced the consumption of commodity eggs when his income increased. This is because he considers X to be inferior for some reason. At the same time, he is consistently increasing consumption of Y. You can see that the values on the Y axis are rising every time the consumer's income increases, unlike the case of X. So Y here is a normal commodity whose consumption increases as income increases, but X here is an inferior commodity whose consumption falls as income increases. We say that the income effect is negative here, because when income increases, consumption falls. Income increases, consumption falls. So the relation is negative. On the one, income is rising, and on the other, consumption is falling. So the income effect is said to be negative, and we have got a new identity for the inferior good. A good is said to be inferior when the income effect is negative. That is, when income increases, the consumer consumes less of it, and when the income falls, he consumes more of it. This is called an inferior good. And in the earlier case, or in this case itself, commodity Y is a normal good. Why commodity Y is a normal good? Because when consumer's income increases, consumer consumes more of commodity Y, and so it is said to be a normal good. And this income consumption curve, it swaps like this. If you have an income consumption curve of this nature, then here as income increases, consumption of Y is falling, and here Y is said to be inferior good, X will be a superior good. So this is how we identify the nature of the commodity using in the income consumption curve, and this is the importance of income consumption curves. An income consumption curve will slop to the left when the commodity measured on the x-axis is inferior good, and it will bend towards the right and downwards when the commodity measured on the y-axis is an inferior good. Okay, so this is about normal and inferior goods. So the two things that we have studied in this class is how budget line responds when income changes. When income increases, budget line shifts outwards, and when the income falls, budget line shifts downwards. And also how the income consumption curve can be derived from the budget line and successive points of equilibrium of the consumer, and how this income consumption curve is useful in differentiating commodities into normal and inferior ones. Okay, commodity is said to be normal if its consumption increases as income increases, or it has a positive income elasticity. A commodity is said to be negative if consumption falls as income increases, or the income effect is negative. In the case of income consumption curve, it will slope downward and to the right if the commodity measured on the y-axis is an inferior good, and if it will slope upwards and to the left if the commodity measured on the x-axis is an inferior good. So that's all for now. Thank you.